Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're back here with another edition, a very special edition of Against the Odds. This week we are playing a deck that I'm calling Ultimate Super Friends. As you can see looking at this deck list, it has many planeswalkers. In fact, it is all planeswalkers. Furthermore, it has at least one of every single planeswalker that has ever been printed in the multiverse. So this means that, take Jace for example. There are maybe 5 different Jaces that have been printed. We can't play all 5, we just don't have enough room in our deck for that. But we are playing a Jace, and the same for every other Planeswalker. If it has been printed in Magic, at least one of them is in our deck. So this leaves us with 34 different Planeswalkers, ranging from little 2-mana Tybalt, the Fiend-Blooded, to big ol' 8-mana Ugin the Spirit Dragon, and everything in between. We're a 5-color deck, we have 26 lands, and all Planeswalkers. So what we're trying to figure out today is what are the odds of winning with a singleton all Planeswalker deck in Modern. Because of how this deck is built, and its singleton Planeswalkers, I don't even think I could go through and read the text on every card in our deck and still keep this deck tech a reasonable length. So I'm going to kind of scroll through and put the pictures up of each of these Planeswalkers while I talk a little bit about how I think this deck's going to work. So as you can see with our first slide here, the big problem with this deck is we just don't have very many early plays. Planeswalkers are really powerful, and I think an all Planeswalker deck can win the game. The problem is we only have 5 plays in our entire deck that costs 2 or 3 mana, and only one, Mr. Tybalt the Fiend-Blooded, that costs 2 mana, so we just don't have much going on in the early part of the game. So what I'm afraid is going to happen with this deck is we are going to play a land and pass, play a land and pass, play a land and pass. If we get lucky, play a Planeswalker, and then maybe activate it once and then die. I think that's the best case scenario in a lot of matchups. We're really going to have things go well for us to take over the game with our Planeswalkers. We're going to need slow draws from our opponent. That said, we have some Planeswalkers. For example, Johnny can gain us life and kill something down in the bottom left. Chandra can kill a little creature. Elspeth Knight Errant can take and create blockers every turn. Same with Garruk Relentless. So once we get to 4 and 5 mana, we have a lot of powerful things we can do. So the challenge is going to be living long enough to get to our 4 and 5 mana plays. And that's the thing, we have 13 4-drops and 11 5-drops and very few Planeswalkers that fall anyplace else on the scale. But these Planeswalkers can do a little bit of everything if we live long enough to get them on the battlefield. A lot of them create card advantage, like Jace, Architect of Thought, so we're constantly refilling our hand. They're making creatures, controlling the battlefield, gaining us life in some instances, like either of the Sorens. So they can do a lot of really cool things. The question is, do we ever get to doing them? And then some of them really aren't that good. Koth of the Hammer, it's a little questionable. It's very aggressive, and our deck isn't very aggressive. But to fill the flavor of playing a completely Planeswalker deck, we are even playing the Planeswalkers that are bad. For example, clearly the worst Planeswalker in our entire deck is Tezzeret the Seeker. So it's 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue, and its abilities are +1, untap 2 target artifacts. Well, since we're all Planeswalkers and lands, we don't have any artifacts. -X, you can search your library for an artifact with converted mana cost X or less and put it on the battlefield. Yep, we still don't have any artifacts. And the ultimate -5, artifacts you control become artifact creatures with power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. So Tezzeret in our deck literally says, I do nothing. Like, it's 5 mana, do nothing. I think the best thing we can do with a Tezzeret is randomly discard it to a Tybalt and get a different card. So that's kind of the problem with this deck. To be fair, not many Planeswalkers in our deck are completely useless, like Tezzeret. Tezzeret's the worst. Domri Raid is pretty bad since all its abilities are creature-centric. And Venser the Sojourner, down by Tezzeret, is one of my all-time favorite planeswalkers, but not very good in our deck. It can blink a permanent, or flicker a permanent, which is awesome with Enter the Battlefield abilities, but planeswalkers don't have those, so not really great in our deck. Can make creatures unblockable, and then if somehow it lives long enough, the emblem is pretty sweet, where you get to exile something whenever you cast a spell. On the other hand, some of our planeswalkers are awesome, like Elspeth Trell makes 3 blockers. Gideon Jura can keep all our other planeswalkers from getting attacked. Liliana Vess can search for whatever planeswalker we want most. Obnixilis can kill a creature. Sarkin Unbroken can make a huge dragon or draw us a card and fix our mana every turn. Vraska can kill any non-land permanent. So I will be really interested to see how this works. Then, of course, if we ever live long enough to get to 6, 7, and 8 mana, we can do some extremely powerful things. Elspeth Sun's Champion makes 3 tokens every turn, or it can wipe away all creatures power 4 or greater. Karn Liberated exiles anything, either from our opponent's hand or a permanent, and its ultimate restarts the game. Nicole Bolas Planeswalker destroys a non-creature permanent with its +1, steals a creature with its -2, and then has a Cruel Ultimatum, almost, type ultimate. And then, of course, the standard staple, Ugin Spirit Dragon, probably the single most powerful planeswalker in our deck, because it is 8 mana, wrath away our opponent's board, and we can usually control it in such a way that it won't wrath away our planeswalkers, so I doubt that we'll lose too many games where we actually resolve an Ugin. What the odds are of winning with this deck is, I am very concerned about. I have a feeling it might be incredibly low, just because of the speed issue I talked about. Modern's a format where a lot of decks can kill by turn 4, or even turn 3, and if our plan is to tap out for our first play, a Planeswalker on turn 4, I can't see that working all that consistently, although I'm really excited to see how all these Planeswalkers interact with each other, and if we live long enough to just play Planeswalker after Planeswalker every single turn, it's going to be so cool. Like, I think it's worth the losses. That said, I did hedge my bet a little bit. If we take and go through a bunch of matches in a row and we are just clearly not winning, I also built slightly less Ultimate Super Friends, which the big difference here is we have a few less Planeswalkers. I think it has 6 less Planeswalkers. It has a few less lands, but it has 10 signets, 1 of each signet. So signets are these mana rocks, cost 2 mana, from the original Ravnica, and basically, like Azuria's Signet, costs 2 mana, and then you can pay 1 and tap it, and add white and blue mana. Boros Signet adds white and red. Dimir adds blue and black, so based on their colors. But what these signets do is they mean that on turn 2, when with the original build of the deck, we wouldn't do anything, instead we will almost always have a signet, which then means on turn 3, we can start playing all our huge abundance of 4 mana Planeswalkers. So this speeds up our deck by an entire turn, and the difference between playing a Elspeth Knight Errant, or a Jace Architect of Thought, or a Chandra Pyromancer, or a Johnny Vengeant on turn 4, on turn 3, is massive. That is such a huge difference. So I'm starting off with the original build, all Planeswalkers and lands, but if things don't go well, we're going to switch and play this build, which is still a very super frenzy list, but it's got a little bit more going on. And the other addition with this version is we also have a sideboard. So we get to play some cards that will actually give us some slight chance of winning. So the first version is really heavy on the flavor. Every single Planeswalker, only Planeswalkers. That's why it's Ultimate Super Friends. This one's a little less ultimate because we got the signets and we have a sideboard that includes Path to Exile, to help us deal with opposing creatures, Thoughtseize to help us deal with whatever our opponent has that's going to ruin our day, counter spells that would counter our planeswalkers, creatures that we'll have a hard time dealing with, 3 negates also to make sure we can resolve our planeswalkers, and the big one, 4 copies of Supreme Verdict. Supreme Verdict and Wrath are just great with planeswalkers because we don't have any creatures, so basically we can wrath away all of our opponent's stuff, but not hurt our stuff. So I'm going to say that our odds of winning with Ultimate Planeswalkers, the first build, are pretty slim. This one's close to we're hoping that our opponent has a heart attack or mulls to 2 type build. Maybe 5%. I think our odds with slightly less Ultimate Super Friends are slightly better. But still not good. It's still very against the odds. But I think that we might be able to steal some games. So pretty much, we're going to need a lot to go right. But we're going to get to see some cool things happen. And some hands that are just unbelievable. And I'm really excited to test it out and just see how it goes. I expect to do a lot of losing this week. But I expect to have a lot of fun losing, because there's nothing cooler than playing a Planeswalker every single turn. And who knows? Like, a lot of these cards have probably never, ever been played with each other. Like, who has had a Kiora the Crashing Wave and a Koth the Hammer of the Hammer on the battlefield at the same time? Or a Xenagos the Reveler and a Garruk Relentless? Or a Venser the Sojourner and a Tibalt the Fiendblooded. This stuff's probably never happened before in the history of Magic, so who knows what cool things or interesting synergies we'll find as we are just playing Planeswalker after Planeswalker. So buckle up, expect a lot of losing, but expect some fun and some laughs along the way, because this deck is pretty sweet. Anyway, make sure to check out mtggoldfish.com. That's where you can vote for next week's Against the Odds deck. I know I commandeered the series to make this video, but we are back to voting for next week. It also has all my other articles, tons of content by other people, decks prices, the metagame strategy, basically anything and everything you could want related to Magic the Gathering. And if you enjoyed the video, take a second and click on that subscribe button that's going to pop up on the bottom here in just a second. It'll keep you up to date on all the greatest and latest in MTG Goldfish videos, and it's a huge favor for us if you'd subscribe. So thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoy the videos, and I will talk to you soon.